as him. But for me, it was that my personality and who I am are two entirely different things. And to have humility before time, sometimes we enter into this narrative of us versus them and trying to change the world and stop the people who are destroying it or enslaving others or whatever. And really, it's about having humility before time and operating from a dharmic versus an adharmic fashion. And that this life that we're living now is a narrative illusion, and as such, you can look into other epics or myths throughout time to see how this narrative illusion can be better lived through, and to use duality against itself, which is how paradoxes work. Sort of like that story where a teacher tells a student, you have if you here's this stick, if you pick it up, I'm gonna hit you with it. If you leave it there, I'm gonna hit you with it. And so the student takes the stick and breaks it. So that kind of thing.
That's super interesting, in a sense also how it ties to comms, and how it ties to comms would be the interesting part, but it reminded me also of something I read in Finite and Infinite Games, and that was precisely about how people, by trying to change for good, right? It's kind of the by trying to change, they're ending other people's games, and that's the ultimate evil, kind of, or that's the source of evil sounds a bit the the words that he's using are sometimes a bit too spiritual for me, or not spiritual, have a wing to a religion, but it's mostly like you say you want to change something for the better, but then you're intervening with other people's narratives, if you will, and most of the time the things or the problems that we need to deal with are the problems that are created by the solutions, right, to other problems, kind of, and that's kind of resonated with that part.
I keep this thing on my desk all the time. It says, Swamiji used to say, who are you to set right the world? You have to first rectify yourself, your own mind. When the mind becomes right, then everything will appear all right. Look within yourself.
That makes conceptually sense. Totally. But it's like, use the duality against itself and so on. That's when it comes to actually making it practical. That's, I think, a lot of how was that in the common communications or comms?
Because I was talking with Zero about something else, about the difference between praise and source cred, and then Durgaras came in, and we had started talking about reality transurfing, which is sort of like a manifestation framework. And so when Durgaras came in, I was curious about his opinion on it, and started telling him how my conception of God had evolved recently from thinking that God is unconscious, and so it has to be made conscious through us, through these fractals these fractals of consciousness that are packaged within our bodies. And that's why also Jesus Christ became man. I think there's historic evidence for that, but maybe we don't have to go there, etc. So I was just curious about how, and really came from C.J. Young interpretation of the story of Job, a biblical story about God making a wager with the devil regarding one of his most faithful believers, and so he tries to explain this by saying, well, it's an analogy between the conscious and the unconscious. The way the whole God framework is, it's that. So it just went into a 1 hour long talk about divinity and spirituality, and yeah, maybe we should have taken here to Omega, but we were just so into the talk.
I have another story about that, by the way. I want to tell you at some point, but it doesn't have to be now.
So maybe we will have tangents to that. I mean, with this ethical aspect or token engineering ethics, it's number one that what Durgadas has on its on his desk, right? So how come, or how do you dare to change or to incentivize everyone else for the better, and think to know how to program those values if you are not aware of your own values, where you stand, and how you make for yourself decisions, how you decide ethics or morality, right? You have your own morality, maybe, or maybe you have to discover it first, and then ethics or ethical aspects that we seem to agree, kind of, that we need to take context into account. And Durgadas, actually, in one of your slides, you had ethics as the dual thinking, on the dual thinking side, right?
Okay, so to give some perspective on my current thinking on this, in my view, there are the way all systems are set up is there's a stimulus and then there's a response, right? And so so there are three aspects to that for me: the stimulus and the response, and then the space between. And the most important part of this entire thing is the space between, right? So for me, I'm okay with having any given stimulus. I'm okay with developing a library of responses, but the primary work that I feel like we need to do in terms of thinking in terms of ethics is what is the diaspora of responses that we can create in the space between the stimulus and the actual response. Do you see what I mean? And so, but the primary thing, when we talk about ethics, there are a lot more things to this than just ethical considerations or moral considerations. But in terms of ethics and morality, it seems to me that the primary consideration is that of consent, right? And so, and specifically informed consent, right? And so, so when I'm considering anything having to do with ethics, I'm always trying to think, do I have enough information to be able to reasonably consent to this thing, right? So there's a stimulus, and then there was a response, but in between there's a decision-making space in which I have to consider all the things that I'm talking about. And so on either side of those decision-making, the walls of those two things of this garden, let's say, of decision-making space is detachment, which is to say I have to be removed enough from the thing to be able to where I have no skin in the game, in a way. You know what I mean? Like I have to have enough detachment, or even if I have skin in the game, I need to have a mental kind of faculty or discipline or emotional space in which I can detach myself from that. Now, on the other hand, I need to also be able to have really good discrimination. So the way that I think about it is the detachment is the soil of this garden, and the things which grow are the variety of responses which I can then take out of, like as my my cornucopia out of the other side, so that I can formulate good responses. And so for me, that's the process. And I think I might have shown you that I've developed a bit of a framework for how we do that in this space, which I could show you again if you want.
Yeah. So one thing here, all of a sudden lighted up, is detachment in this decision making space, right? Detachment, that is actually a pretty great connection to all of the biases that we have, right? The confirmation bias, and maybe also, groupthink and so on and so forth. So some of those things I added, and or in this token engineering ethics proposal or initiative proposal. I just took notes. I just wanted to also highlight that part, what you said, that it makes sense, or that it's where it connects, because we know we're modeling, we have our own assumptions, biases, etc., and we need to first of all be aware of those. Then this detachment all of a sudden makes sense for me. It's one of those notions that never I struggle with typically, like how do you detach from outcomes and what have you, but that's what we're actually talking about when we say check your assumptions.
Can I show you a thing that I found on the internet about consent that's really helpful?
Yes, please go ahead.
I can also put it in the agenda if you want. If you want me to put it somewhere, maybe you could tell me where.
Yes, please. Do you have the agenda? I shared the links in the in our chat.
I've got it up. I'm just wondering where you'd like me to put it.
Yes, just
bottom?
put it either into the chat or in the agenda, and we can collect it or recollect afterwards as well. Okay. It's good that we get those collections.
I don't know if you can see this, but I really like it.
Now we're seeing it.
So yeah, so may I, will you, yes you may, right? And so yeah, and so on the inside is the consent thing, right? But then on the outside is the shadow stuff,
What is the shadow stuff like?
So
can you?
Okay, so on the allow side, if I'm going to allow others to act if they want, right? I'm going to tend to tolerate others. I'm just going to endure stuff that maybe I wouldn't. I might be a doormat or a pushover or a victim or come off as passive, right? Where if I'm in a servant mentality, right? If I'm giving in a giving mentality, then I could become off as a do-gooder, like, look at me, I did this great thing, or claiming behavior, like I
martyr.
Yeah, martyr, yeah. So there's all these sort of different aspects to it, and it would be interesting to figure out a way to programmatically see how the consent thing works in terms of ethics, right? So I like this because it actually has some logic to it,
Yeah, we'll definitely go deeper. So we should definitely go there. Why? Because this whole ethics and consent, one question there is, how did you get the link to consent in from your perspective? Because we could see it as a group of people who, let's say, the techies or token engineers or the technical token engineers or token engineers on the engineering side, or maybe more experienced. However, it might be that one group is defining those rules and designing the mechanisms and so on and so forth. But we also talk about the participants of a token network, and that they shall be equally, at the very least, very well informed
right.
to make those decisions. And to be able to say, yes, we are participating and we are active, we and we are not being manipulated by a mass manipulation machine on global scale, and being rewarded for it with tokens. So that kind of is the question of token engineering ethics: is what can one do if you are on the doer side, right? What can you assure, enable, or what will be your repertoire to enable this, to enhance participation, to enhance information accessibility, so that you know that this token network is out in the open, everyone can participate, but everyone also has access to information in an understandable manner to actually be able to consent to the participation. Because a lot of what we see in token projects or networks is FOMO, induced by sometimes by designers, sometimes by just evangelists, if you will, sometimes just good intentions, but also there are just real scams, of course, right? So in that part, I think there is this consent is almost like the ethical side of, or the participation side. Yeah. Okay.
So
here.
I have a wonder about this. In the document that I've created, I'm trying to figure out. It seems to me that that consent is see, like, I'll give you an example. I'm really only interested in participating in this community in certain limited ways, and because my interest is only limited to certain things, and therefore I'm outsourcing my trust in other people to create something. And what I'm doing is I'm trying to influence them so that what they create is better. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, and then I'm just accepting the result of whatever these people I'm influenced have made. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, and so to some degree, I've created this document to show sort of the process of participating, right? But I do understand that there's technical change agents, there's educational change agents, and then there's emotional change agents, in the sense of where the engineers themselves are doing this thing, right? And I have a huge body of technical information in what I do, but so I think if we keep in mind that each of these has to be participating. Do you know what I mean? We have to have the technical, we have to have the educational, and we have to have the emotional. But also that people have limits, right? So to some degree, my informed consent, I'm willing to waive parts of it because I just don't want to spend the amount of time learning, the specific decisions that a given token engineer made about a variable somewhere in the middle of this thing. Do you know what I mean? And so to what degree, I participate in is a kind of a spectrum, it seems to me. But at the same time, I don't know. So what I'm trying to do is there anything in this that I could add consent behind? Because it seems like consent is could be at any one of these steps, really.
So what, number one, I've seen the earlier iterations, and this one is super on point. Almost, I would love to just build on this in especially on the participation side. I will just share after this. I'll share our document so we can put things in there.
Okay.
But one thing you said, and everyone else, please jump into the discussion, right? So if you want to add something or have questions, but this one is really good. You said in this informed consent, because there are limitations, time, and also, knowledge, don't want or can build up knowledge, or you just get bits of it. So you are outsourcing. What did you say?
Yeah.
Trust?
I said
You're
I'm
sharing.
outsourcing. Yeah, so there are two parts of this that I think of. Number one is that the non-crypto cultural dynamic is such that it's constantly encouraging us to outsource all of our lives, everything, to some centralized authority, where we have then no agency or autonomy in terms of, what to do. So a huge part of what the crypto cultural build seems to me to be trying to do is to sort of retake back our autonomy and agency. But at the same time, because we're so trained to outsource our autonomy and agency, that in some ways we almost have to take into account when people arrive in this cryptocurrency space that we're going to have to train them away from that assumption and say to them explicitly that this is the thing that's happening out there, this is what's happening in here, rather than to have it be an implicit thing. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think that's part of this educational change agent thing. What I'm saying to you, though, is that because I have limited time and energy, right, what I have to be able to do is to be able to have informed consent about where I can make a difference in this community, and then be willing to outsource and trust the rest of the community to carry out all the other functions on my behalf, right? Without falling back into the thing that I did back when I was dealing with centralized stuff. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think thermostatically we have to be aware that people who show up at our doorstep are going to be sort of famished in this way, where they don't have anything other than I'm supposed to outsource everything to other people, and then account for that in some way through our
and then ask for customer service. So
yeah, can I talk to your manager?
That's literally what's happening in crypto. Basically, they come in, on some tokens, and even hack literally through ethos scan to get at these tokens, and then they realize what they just did. And then all of a sudden they ask for you have to do this right, and so on. So this whole the range also between trusting the government, trusting the authorities, versus trustless, Bitcoin trustless, and in between again is this range of agency. It's this balance of autonomy and interdependence, right? And this learning and unlearning. So this something like the participant's journey, if you will, and that the environment must be able to provide these functions or these steps as you put here. So I really like that.
Yeah, and this is only draft 2, so this is the second version of this. So I'm happy to draft it more and add more layers to it if I need to. But
yeah, because that was the one part that I, seeing the token engineering or token engineers or practitioners, right, who have to make these decisions on the domain or business side, as well as on the technical implementation side. That I had my head wrapped around, or we are currently dealing with it, but we have not yet taken into account the participants' journey. It was my feeling, like, what does it mean? Okay, we talk about token engineering ethics, and then people making active decisions and making choices for a token economy, that they need to be ethical. But I was always thinking we're missing the other part, like, as you say, this is a participatory open network, right? And as a participant who gains autonomy, self-agency, you also need to be more active. So it's almost also unethical if you participate in an open token economy and then expect things to work out, or the parameters being set perfectly. If and then if they didn't, or if you don't understand things, or what is the state, for example, you can't just stand there and raise your hand and say, I don't know where we're at, but basically ask for directions at the very least, and then be active part of it. So let me share,
Sorry,
so
I
that
have
we
a
also
graphic.
get
I have a
some.
graphic for that in the customer journey. Right.
That's Durga's phrase. I have a graphic for that.
That's so true. It's so much. Yeah. And now it's a graphic I didn't make, but I think it roughly mirrors. So what I might want to do is create a customer journey of people inside of a DAO as an alternative to this one. So maybe you and I can collaborate on that, and then in that sense, so we can sort of determine what are the ethical considerations in terms of the sections that a person goes through, right?
Wow. Hey, what are the others saying? So, like literally a participant's journey.
Right.
Yeah, this is the user's
Because
journey.
people
And,
are.
yeah. It would just be changing purchase for praise or something. But everything else is exactly like it's very analogous. Totally.
Yeah. Well. Yeah, so we could do something like this too, where we can say what are the different departments, and then you can go through and say this is actually in German, but I rather like the way this is done too. So I'm happy to make up a separate version of this that's for DAOs or for our DAO or.
Yeah. So the token engineering. So things that are being decided on, where basically, or phases of this journey, and literally we are through it all together once, almost there, right? So I think, and we have a lot of input we can take on, and that might be actually the starting point of our focus groups. Basically, so we know what are the phases we go through, right? Maybe also progressive decentralization, meaning there will be iterations of those phases, but in each phase we know also what patterns, literally the soft interrelational aspects of a token economy, of a community coming together, right? But also the very hard quantitative and mechanistic aspects of literal token engineering and implementation and deployment. And in those phases and steps, we know, or at the very least, that would be the first thing we can start with, and then also exchange in those focus groups is what are the decisions that participants, both the very active and both those who make those decisions, what are their ethical concerns, or what ethical concerns might exist in those situations. And maybe, I don't know if we might be able to come up with this response library, but that would be a nice setting the stage for this first round, and I will incorporate what we just discussed definitely. Entire screen. Let me also share. I shared the link in our chat as well. But this token engineering ethics, yes, the proposal is here, and that was already from.
I can't see your screen.
I don't see your screen yet.
Is it building up at least?
I think
No.
a little bit maybe.
Now you should be able to see it, right? Let me try again. Are you seeing now?
Not yet.
Not yet. No.
strange. Okay. Now I'm trying again. Let's select this window. Maybe it's better. Now?
Yeah, now yes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay, cool. So I think you're by now all familiar with the summary of token engineering ethics, that it's about all the decisions that one needs to make to get a token network live, or the important decisions where ethics plays a role. And what I did is, first of all, put together and then cluster more or less the things that we discussed. And one cluster was this whole structures of communication processes and tools. But and tools, okay. But right now, and I would add it here, is basically this whole life cycle almost, or maybe jump in if you have better words, like this life cycle of token engineering, or
Life cycle is a good term, I think. What is the life cycle of? By the way, I did modify that graphic a little bit, so I'm gonna change the graphic that I uploaded. I put informed consent basically on the two middle parts, so that.
So you can basically add here, Durgadas, in this document, and I would I would just refine it or make it a bit more accessible. But the one thing that was interesting was this participant's journey.
Yeah.
I mean, the participants are the people who are not actively taking decisions in the token engineering design phase, right? But they are definitely affected as participants by those decisions. Now, when we have the journey, basically, again, underneath we have basically.
Well, I would want to do a focus matrix for that to determine who the actual participants are, and I think I've asked in a bunch of different contexts for this. I think this would do a lot of good for us to know specifically, who would be there. So, for example, what's the life cycle of a steward, or what's the life cycle of a, so somebody like me, or a graviton, or you know what I'm saying, like the different roles that we
that would be
decided
like
are important.
user examples, because I see this it's a journey, but you have these hybrid models, because you can be a steward and you're still a participant as well.
That's right.
Or it's mixed. And if we want to include this consent shadow part, I also see that as a matrix, and you can see you can put the users inside the petals of this consent shadowy part, because we will see that those are interconnected as well in this unity consent shadowy roles of every participant in this. And it's going to be connected with the 4 quadrants as well. So we theoretically at the end we can make this programmatic cat simulation to see what are the problems. Yeah.
I'm not so sure how cat goes at that level yet.
No, really,
but
that's a fundamental tool in our toolkit. We have to use that.
No, we need to put in some natural language processing, I think, like getting all of the qualitative space analyzed would be so interesting.
Yeah.
But now that we had this initial discussion, I just saw that what we had until now was more on the super practical side, and what the introductory exchange that we just now had is actually the playing field, almost like, okay, this is the participants' journey, they're consenting. I mean, even a token engineer, one person, let's take a technical modeler, right? Even they are a participant and they have a journey, right? So that's, maybe we will have a nice interesting time working on these, I guess. But what we would need to do is pick out or get that to a level of abstraction that, other token networks who might not have the same instantiation as tech, for example, with stewards and so on. It seems like a pattern, but might not be necessary,
and it's different
or
from
mandatory.
the other graphic that you guys saw. That is like the a product journey, more or less, to set up the startup or the corporation, and this is like different if we see it from a journey perspective. So there may be like a basic journey or a basic path, but then you have all these interconnections that are going to be different. Yeah, and it's a matrix as well. It's matrix 3.
Yeah, like measuring
Which I don't like.
agency.
Which I don't like the matrix 3. So yeah, it can go to that. I'm mentioning the film in this way. Yeah.
Okay. And the one, basically, I think, Durgadas, the one drawing or the graphics that you have, can you paste this here? The pink one
Both of them are there.
that had the participation outside, or almost like the participants' journey working through, but in the middle, those 3 tires basically are almost like the phases in design where ethical dilemmas can be counteracted or accommodated without becoming detrimental to this participation or consent and agency.
Both the graphics that I showed are uploaded to the Omega group right now. So.
Okay. So I'm basically trying to wrap up and get feedback. What else might be missing is the idea. If you haven't seen it, also please review. 1 second. Here, the research areas, research methods document that we have, what Lydia mostly populated, is really nice putting together of methods that fits to us or to this to our emergent culture and ethics or ethos, I guess. And what we picked from that is basically, yes, it is going to be participatory research, and it is going to be with focus groups. And the initial focus groups and topics would be basically I would really take this one first, this life cycle, token engineering, token economy, the journeys basically from different perspectives, and as Letty also said, at the very least, the 4 quadrants as view point of views.
And those will be the themes that we were trying to find for so long. That what are the points we have to focus on? I think that's very explanatory in this way. Yeah.
Exactly.
From the ethical
perspective. Exactly, and that would be basically at a well enough abstraction level, so every participant in that focus group can get a foothold. But that would be basically us laying or creating the map and showing the ethical dilemmas that can emerge or have emerged, where we have basically participation and people are exchanging their experiences and using their own words, etc. So, and what we would need to decide, maybe working this out, like how many sessions we should put into, or maybe make multiples per week or 1 week of talking about life cycle, right? On a higher abstraction level, I would say, right? All participants, all views. The second group that was pretty practical and already visible from our former talks was why, or this ethical dilemmas, unethical behavior, etc. Why and when can that emerge? And that was something that I thought was resonated. That unethical behavior also emerges because of time pressure, goal setting a goal without knowing whether that goal will be beneficial for whom, and all those aspects, right? And then really analyzing the environment, if you will. And then we had a couple of things coming up, like agile framework. Is it a good or a bad thing? And actually, I haven't linked it here, but I went back to basic, and literally one of the founding fathers of Agile, Uncle Bob, has published. He's been called Uncle Bob because Robert something, I forgot his name, but he literally published a book on this in 2019, just a couple of years back, saying, okay, I have to set the record straight. Agile is a mindset, more about mindsets than processes, and he points out all of the things that have been implemented or left out, and that's why basically we have things like dark agile, etc. And the other thing that came up when I did a bit of research is that currently, very new to 2020, 2021, people are now talking about ethics in Agile. So Agile has taken the world or has been accepted so well, because who doesn't want to be agile, right? In a competitive world, if you're more agile than your competitor, you're winning big. But exactly that mindset has also corrupted actual values, agile values that started. And it's so there we can have a really informative and nice sessions, and that will be very practical to everyone involved in any project, basically, that has to do with digital product or software development or delivery. But what we can do is prepare that for token engineering, token projects. So that would be more about highly practical. Would be for people from the business and technical side, less so for people who would just participate in a deployed token economy, right? But very much, I think, useful for this whole coordination, self-organization. And Agile was all about self-organizing small software teams in the beginning, etc. So,
can I have a couple of other things that might be helpful in this regard. I'm just trying to find the.
I am.
Oh yeah.
That's quite an underwhelming quote down there on B.
This one?
It's unfortunate that that was said by one of the most quoted economists of our time.
Oh, Keynes.
Yeah. But that's basically, it's literally the thing. Also, Friedman, Keynes and Friedman, and they set the stage for this hypercapitalism that we're experiencing. That if you maximize shareholder value, meaning maximize profit, everyone is going to be well off, and sometime it will trickle down to everywhere, right? But that's not happening. But this one is also found newly, very, very newly, and it's either in finite and infinite games or in Small is Beautiful. And that book I can also recommend. I will just add those books in our TE Consilience.
Reading list.
I also just wanted
list or the references. Yeah.
I also just wanted to share this. I shared a link in the thing about Cynefin and Agile together, and I think there is an ethical question. Oh, you already have those, but there's also a link to explaining how Cynefin and Agile kind of work together. But the thing that I'm showing is kind of what you have on your screen there. But there's a narrative around this in the sense that if you're taking the approach of something which is clear, known, and familiar, but in fact is a complex and unknown process which we're experimenting on, that's also creates an ethical problem, right? So if you should be experimenting on a thing like I'll give you an example in terms of the journey of the participant, or even well, anyone really, if what we're doing is experimenting, like we're creating a brand new thing here, right? But at what point does the thing move from the complex into the complicated? At what point does it go from the realm of the expert into the realm of the clear? What parts of this machine need to be clear versus complicated versus complex? Do you see what I'm saying? And so that's what I'm trying to say is a lot of people I find are in the middle here in this confused thing.
Yes.
And part of the reason is because I don't think we do a good enough job of narratively informing them as to which parts of this thing, and because we shift between them so quickly, that it can be extremely disorienting to people who can't tell the difference between them. And so I like this graphic because it makes a thing that enables us to say narratively what's going on. Do you know what I mean? And say, here's where we are with this, that we're in the realm of the complex here, we're in the realm of the complicated here, we're in the realm of the clear here, right? Or we're in the realm of the automated, which is that other little robot sitting up on that additional ledge in the clear side of the thing, where we've automated that away. Do you see what I'm saying? So much of what you guys are asking about when, is how is it that we automate this thing? Well, if we're still experimenting on it, how are we going to move it all the way into the complicated and then into the clear and then automate it? Do you see what I'm saying?
And that literally is the smart contract. So if you put something on a blockchain as a logic in smart contract, that's going to be that robot in that corner. So whatever you put out there should be known, familiar, clear.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that brings us to the ethical problems as well, because if we are experimenting in a subjective way, we are not bound to this kind of high level commitment to fairness. But if we see that this is not as emergent and we are moving to the complicated part and the automated part, we have to answer different questions. Yeah, and this
Well,
is very much connected to the agile thing as well, because we are trying to move in the milestone and
Right.
say, okay, we go there and we have to comply with these organizational structures and objectives, but then we forget the first level, that is what is ethical in this specific context for this specific participant. So yeah, this like those three are super relevant to connect.
Well, and the other part is that in terms of ethics, you know, roughly speaking, me as a person who's sort of teaching, right? My job is I've done a bunch of I've lived in the chaotic, and as a result of living in the chaotic, I've then moved that into the complex, which is a lower energy state. That's why the guy in the left hand thing goes downward, because then I'm no longer putting out fires, and everything is now what I'm doing is I'm experimenting, and from that experiment, then I go up this little ladder into what is called good practice. Okay, it's not best practice, and then the guy who goes all the way up the tall ladder, what he's doing is bringing with him is best practice, right? And then automation comes then after best practice. But
I love it just so much.
But
we can tell a story here from
exactly
actual
right.
projects.
That's right.
Yeah, my only concern about this is like it makes sense from an individual perspective, and when you try to observe an organization as an organic part, it does not make sense that easily, because we are talking about different structures and people and journeys being together. So it's more difficult to see that from the organizational organic part. Yeah.
The second part I was
what
going to say. I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
The second part of the narrative is that people who have worked their way clockwise through this process. Okay. It's then their responsibility to then walk the people down the rest of the way, and it's informed consent to bring them down the ladder, because what will happen to them is that if we don't do it that way, what we'll be doing is we'll be excluding them, and then they'll just fall off the cliff into the chaotic and not have any idea what's going on.
But that's
and this
happening.
is where we lose
like,
people,
that's
right?
happening.
That happens because nature is chaotic in a way as well, so we cannot organize that. And we
that's right.
Yeah.
So I'm going to propose something, namely a true story based on the true stories of token economies out there. that we tell the stories how people literally, like Banker, right? Banker is this automaton that works. It's a bonding curve, and then everyone's just trying to, and literally they fall off the. Hey, it's that simple. It's just working. I saw the smart contract, and I know how to do this. In this new remote-only global network, we're just gonna have a great bonding curve. Literally, that's what's happening, right? In many, if not all, and then basically, how do we get here? I think literally the token. Sorry. But I see that we're running out of time. So literally, I think we could do a storytelling exercise for ourselves here. May I propose like a bit of asynchronous mapping based on true stories? Of token engineering. But I agree also with Letty that not so quite sure if that will be a very practical guide, but it's a very useful theory in any case. So that would be something I would love to continue. And I guess with those two groups, like the initial setting the stage and the very practical aspects. We have ourselves at least, I don't know, 10 to 20 sessions almost. But I think it will be very worthwhile, interesting. My only question would be, what do you think? It seemed like mostly agreement, or mostly pushing in the positive direction. I had two other things that I grouped, but maybe we go to those as we move through our what we have on our plate, which is those 2 points mentioned. But the other one was the learning society, rabbit holes of token networks, crypto, and neck breaks pace of change, ever complex techno-economic, socio-institutional environment, etc. And there, under that, I put the deliberately development organization that Durgadas also mentions, like actually growing and learning is part of the game. You know, it's not about covering your weaknesses or that's what you don't know, but actually putting it out there and seeing this community as a chance to grow, or know who to go and ask for, or who to outsource your trust and get information from, to have this consent, build this consent, etc. That would be something. We could put also the game-based learning that brings forth systems thinking, transdisciplinary, but also experiencing these ethical dilemmas in games of token networks or ecosystems. That is something interesting we could put in there. And the fourth point is actually also as important, because we say that's part of the ethos of token engineering, or we hope or see. And how can we nurture or keep create this integrity or integration of the many worldviews, if you will. There I have only those 2 points, that openness doesn't necessarily mean inclusion or inclusive, and so many worldviews, so many perspectives, the pluralism that we value, but how can we integrate this as well?
So
I get, yeah.
my teacher uses a term that I like, which might be helpful, which is called finding unity in diversity. And for me, that's a crucial phrase, because you really only have real unity when there is diversity, right? So I mean, life itself, right? Life finds a way, according to the Jurassic Park. I mean, that's the way in which it finds that way. Is it actually that's the cliff that we fall off, is the lack of diversity, right? So when things are clear, when we've made definitions and we've automated and everything, there's going to be always something missing. And what is it that we do to divert people to go down the ladder into the complicated, rather than falling off the cliff into the chaotic? And so the thing that I was saying about earlier about what a community educates is what it becomes, is literally what is your strategy about, instead of pushing people off a cliff, direct them down the ladder. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, that's literally the narrative that I'm trying to express there. So
yeah, and we link it to the consent part, as in service and giving and providing a gift, and the gift is to be rescued in a way that is ethical.
Yeah,
Let's
exactly.
say in a community that is diverse and inclusive.
Exactly. And so we just tell people, if you want to know, then you have to start becoming an expert in some way. And that's true when the moment you say, I'm gonna stop outsourcing all of my money, and I'm gonna take care of all my own currency and crypto. Now you have to suddenly be responsible for all the things the bank used to do for you. And it's a certain amount of education involved, a certain amount of complicatedness involved.
Yeah, but it's a spectrum, as you
Right.
say. So, and I think that that's and in between, maybe it's the same spectrum, almost like that space in between the stimulus and response, and that response is basically comes from your understanding, your agency,
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
and is
And the
still
DDO,
interdependent. Yeah.
the DDO is actually putting things in place to measure the effectiveness of their company and of the cohort of employees to the degree to which they improve the lives of the themselves and others. Right. So they have tools. If you read the book, The Ever Culture, you know, people assess, they have an assessment of themselves, and the person's like, well, I talk all the time. Well, and instead of, and they'll have an app on the phone in one of these companies that says, instead of talking, this person let other people talk, and that's an improvement for them. And so they get credit right then and there about what they did. It actively encourages that person to grow as a person away from their own weakness. Do you see what I'm saying?
That's a
And
super
so,
well-known VC, and they are doing that. Yeah.
Yeah.
There are different KPIs you can measure, and this one is like different one.
Exactly.
Okay,
So what I'm trying to figure out is what
ambivalent.
KPIs.
Yeah. So a bit ambivalent there, or you know, I can see the scary side of it.
Yeah.
A lot, but at the same time, as well, that I agree. Like somewhere in between, that we need to find a way to deal with this complexity without, you know, giving away your agency to some expert or politician or what have you. There are ways that you need to be out there on the hook, some sort of transparency, feedback, but at the same time, you know, you hear about this hedge fund, Bridgewater, I think, from Ray Dalio.